What's going on? Welcome to Weekly Wheaties, episode number 2. I'm going to continue talking about Tesla, kind of add on to what I talked about last week. What I want to kind of focus on today is Tesla's safety. And this kind of stems from a few different things, but one of the major things that helps with their safety is something that they call autopilot or full self-driving, also known as FSD. Now, I know it's got a lot of negative flack in the community and the media world, if you will. People getting in wrecks, cars jumping off the road, going whatever, which way. But I'm here to tell you those are not drivers doing what they should be responsibly. So, adaptive cruise control is installed in a bunch of newer vehicles today. You set a cruise speed, you set it to follow a car so many car lengths ahead, and your car automatically slows down and speeds up based on the car in front of it, the speed of the traffic's moving, or the flow of the traffic and where you're driving, right? Some cars even come with what they call lane keep assist, where it basically keeps your car in the lane, and if you start veering to one side, it kind of ping pongs you to the other. If you've ever rode in a vehicle with one of these, I say ping pong intentionally because you can actually feel the car kind of jerk you a lot of times. A Tesla doesn't do that. Teslas pretty much keep you centered the entire time. When I mean centered the entire time, they have cameras and sensors that are looking for the lines on either side of the road, and they're constantly scanning, they're constantly looking for other cars, and it's doing a little bit of change in the steering wheel every 100th second, if you will. You don't see it because it happens so minute and so small and so quick, but it's automatically centering itself all the time, constantly, compared to the other ones where it does that ping pong effect. So that's what autopilot does, is it keeps you centered in the lane, either at a speed or up to a speed based on the traffic flow in front of you. And most vehicles that come with adaptive cruise control and lane keep assist typically only work on the major highways, major interstates. As long as there is a road with lines, to my knowledge, autopilot will work on a Tesla. And that's give or take, like some of the older roads, back roads, if they're freshly striped, it might not have all the data it needs to do that. But for the most part, most roads, autopilot will work and the car will keep you on the road, centered in the lane, and the speed that's appropriate for whatever road you happen to be on. That keeps you pretty safe because it keeps distance in front of you. It keeps you centered in the lane so you're not jerking, because that jerking effect could cause cars in other lanes or in front of you or behind you to potentially think something's going on. Whereas if you were to think back to cars that literally just have cruise control, and I'm talking like 5 years ago and older, cruise control, you set a speed and the car stays the speed no matter what. That's a good thing, don't get me wrong, because it's better than not having cruise control, but you're always having to adjust it based on the car speeds in front of you. And if you're going up an overpass, your car kind of like jerks you back really quick because it tries to floor it to keep the same speed, or it'll like let off the gas and put on the brakes sometimes because it wants to get back to that speed. That's what your typical cruise control does. And on that note, would you ever get in a vehicle, set the cruise control, and jump in the back seat? Or would you ever, before cruise control, take a brick, put on the pedal, and jump in the back seat? Of course not, right? Well, the Teslas typically that do get in wrecks are the ones where there's no driver interaction, because the person set autopilot or full self-driving or whatever you want to call it, and they get into the other seat, or they fall asleep or play a game on their phone, God forbid. So you can't blame the car for the driver, right? And I know a lot of people try to do that, and it's the one-offs where one kind of thing happened and the driver was paying attention but the car didn't do something. I have a hard time believing that. These cars do a really good job at alerting the driver to put your hands on the wheel, to pay attention, to give it some feedback. Yes, there's ways around that, but that's not the car's fault, right? Don't blame the car. The next thing I want to talk about is this I talked about range a little bit last week, but I didn't talk about how the range changes based on your driving style or what kind of driving you're doing. So if you're just doing straight interstate, your range is going to typically deplete at a steady pace, right? Especially if the speed is constant. However, if you get into like city driving or traffic, the range can actually increase compared to the steady driving because you have regenerative braking. You let off the pedal and the car uses the motor to slow the car down, and that force that it's taking, it's using that power basically to put something back into the battery. So it's recharging the battery. If small, it's still giving it a little bit more to help the overall range of the car. Something else that regenerative braking does is it actually helps you as a user with maintenance. And what I mean by that is regenerative braking essentially is a form of braking. So when you use the motor to slow the car down and put power back into the battery, you're not having to hit the brake pedal. And if you don't hit the brakes, you're not putting wear and tear on the brake pads or the brake rotors, and arguably even some cases the tires, because you're not like skidding on the tires and causing them to bounce and rub across pavement or asphalt or concrete, what have you. Compared to the regenerative braking, it's actually still letting the tires turn, but it's turning at a slower speed, so the tires aren't skipping. Again, even if small, all of this kind of adds up to prolong the life of the tires, the brakes, other wear and tear on the vehicle. Since we're talking about safety, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention NHTSA. So the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, referred to as NHTSA, is one of the FHWA arms that deal with traffic safety. And part of their traffic safety deals with cars and what dictates a safe car. All the features that cars offer, the automatic cruise control is in that, autopilot is part of that. But it's also the way the car is built. And if you think about a typical ICE vehicle, like I mentioned, that's an internal combustion vehicle, those all gas cars, diesel trucks, whatever you want to call it, have motors in the front, right? That's not anything crazy to understand. Y'all have all seen a vehicle with a motor. Electric vehicles don't have a motor. The battery is typically a sled, if you will, that's underneath the seats, and it runs from the front tire to the back tire. So the main piece of the car is a big battery sled. And the motors are a lot smaller. They take up a lot less space. So you, like right behind the dash is where the motor is for the front wheels. And in the back, it's literally like right under the back seats. And they take up a negligible space compared to a gasoline motor. So what that means is if you were to rear end somebody or get hit head on, you don't have this big 1,000-pound motor getting pushed into the cab of the car. The entire hood of your car can essentially absorb any type of crash that you might be receiving. So that's one way that they're safe from a front side crash. A side swipe, if you will, or a T-bone, the A-pillar is what this is called. They're built just like a typical car, but again, you have this big sled underneath that stops a lot of that impact. And Teslas, if I'm not mistaken, the rollover rating, they hold the top, or four of the top 6 spots for cars with rollover ratings. So what that means is if you were to take every car ever manufactured, Tesla would be in the top 6. All the Tesla vehicles will be in the top 6 of those that do not roll over, or do not roll over as much, or they're a lot safer when they do roll over. There's a really cool video on YouTube you can go find. If I remember, I'll link it down below, where you can go watch the Model X, which is the worst rated Tesla in regards to turnover. And it basically gets, if the car is going and it gets hit, it turns up and then it gets almost perpendicular and comes back down. Just because the momentum of the car wasn't enough to push it over enough. And the weight is so distributed in the car, it doesn't want to flip. It wants to stay on 4 wheels. So for new drivers, especially Gen X kids coming up nowadays, there's been some studies that they don't like to drive. They don't want to drive. So what better than a car that can drive itself, and it's the safest car on the road. Just saying. I don't make any money for Tesla to say this. I'm just a fan, and I'm a big proponent of highway safety, so there's that. Yeah, they're very safe in regards to the physical layout, how they're manufactured. They're very safe with the technology that's built. I talked last week about the ability to charge and range. I don't know if I mentioned the top range, but no pun intended, they range from about 250 to 400 miles, depending on the model that you buy. And those, again, they do degrade over time. I'm not going to sit here and tell you they don't, but it's very negligible in regards to the grand scheme of how far they can go and how long the batteries do last. And Tesla does a really good job with charging and how they want to stop charging when it reaches a certain level. They don't want you to charge to 100% all the time. And they also don't want you to bring it down to 0 to help with the battery life. So, hope you learned something. Hope y'all enjoyed. Have a great day. See you next week.